The Caitlin Clark era in Indiana hit an unexpected pause. After weeks of speculation, the news is official. Caitlin will not return for the rest of the 2025 WNBA season. A groin strain suffered in July has sidelined her for months, and while the tests showed no serious structural damage, the Fever and Clark made the same choice: health first. For fans who've watched her transform the league in real time, it's a tough pill to swallow. Clark was the spark, the storyline, the phenomenon that pulled new audiences into women's basketball. And now, the Fever will have to finish the season without her. But here's the twist: despite losing their biggest star, Indiana has kept fighting. They clinched a playoff spot, surprised critics with their resilience, and proved that the future of this franchise is about more than one player. This isn't the end of the Caitlin Clark effect. It's the beginning of something else: a deeper team identity, a recalibration of expectations, and the start of a long-term plan that could make the Fever stronger when she comes back. If you want the real breakdown, how the Fever are surviving without Clark, how fans are adjusting, and what this means for 2026 and beyond, you're in the right place. Hit that subscribe button, smash the like, and drop your take in the comments. Is this just a pause in the revolution, or the moment Indiana learned how to build something bigger than hype? Right now, the Fever are living in uncharted territory. The plan all season long had been simple: ride the Caitlin Clark wave. She was the Rookie of the Year candidate, the face of the franchise, and the reason Indiana went from overlooked to must-watch in just months. Every game was a spectacle, every highlight a headline, every win another sign that Indiana basketball was back. But once her season ended early, everything had to change. The Fever could no longer depend on Caitlin's logo threes, her court vision, or her leadership under pressure. Instead, they had to dig deeper into the roster, and surprisingly, they did. Players who had once played in her shadow were suddenly forced into the spotlight. Guards stepped up in playmaking roles. Forwards took on more scoring responsibility. Veterans became more vocal, demanding intensity and focus from younger teammates. And collectively, the Fever started winning games many thought they would lose. That's what has made this post-Clark stretch so fascinating. It hasn't been perfect. Far from it. There have been frustrating losses, moments where the absence of a superstar was glaring, and stretches where the offense stalled without her gravity. But there have also been flashes of resilience. Games where the Fever proved they could defend, grind, and scrape out wins. Games where the supporting cast became the story. The result: a playoff berth. For the first time in years, Indiana didn't collapse under pressure. They didn't fold when their star went down. They fought their way into the postseason, not as a team carried by one player, but as a group learning to grow without her. That matters. Because when Caitlin Clark does return, she won't be walking back into a team that's dependent on her for everything. She'll be joining a roster that's battle-tested, confident, and deeper than anyone gave them credit for. And this is the silver lining of the season-ending news. Yes, fans wanted to see Caitlin in the playoffs. Yes, the league will miss her presence in the biggest games. But in the long run, this forced evolution might be exactly what Indiana needed. The players now know they can compete without leaning on Clark for every possession. They know they can close games, find ways to score, and lock in defensively. That confidence doesn't vanish when Caitlin returns. It compounds. It means that next season, the Fever won't just be a one-woman show. They'll be a team with weapons all over the court. Of course, that doesn't erase the disappointment. Fans expected fireworks all season long, and losing Clark changes everything. National broadcasts lose their star attraction. Ticket sales flatten. Social media buzz cools. The Fever are still relevant, but the electricity isn't the same without her. That's the reality. But the bigger story is this: the Fever are learning how to win without Caitlin, and that makes them far more dangerous when she comes back. This isn't just a pause button. It's a test, one the Fever are slowly proving they can pass. If there's one thing Caitlin Clark's season-ending announcement made clear, it's this: the Indiana Fever and their star guard are prioritizing the long game over the quick fix. In today's sports world, where fans demand instant results and headlines demand constant storylines, that decision may not satisfy everyone. But it's the only one that makes sense. Groin injuries are notoriously deceptive. They can look minor at first, but if aggravated, they can linger for months or even years. Rushing back from a strain is a gamble, and one that has derailed countless athletes across sports. Push too hard, too fast, and what could have been a manageable recovery turns into a recurring nightmare. For a player like Caitlin, whose game depends on explosive movement, lateral agility, and confidence in every step, there's no margin for error. That's why the Fever set the tone early. No timeline, no pressure, no rushing. From the moment tests confirmed the strain, the message was clear. This wasn't about squeezing a few more games out of her in 2025. This was about protecting the foundation of the franchise for 2026 and beyond. It's a refreshing shift in philosophy. For decades, women's sports have been undervalued, underfunded, and treated as if the players were replaceable. Stars were often expected to play through pain or tough it out, because the leagues themselves couldn't afford to lose their main attractions. Caitlin's case shows how much things are changing. Instead of being pressured to rush back for ticket sales or television contracts, she's being told to heal, properly, fully, and without compromise. That's bigger than just basketball. It's a statement. A recognition that the value Caitlin brings isn't limited to a single season, or even a single year. She's not just a highlight machine or a ratings bump. She's the future of the league, the athlete who will carry the Fever and the WNBA into new territory for years to come. That future is worth protecting, even if it means disappointing fans in the short term. Of course, that hasn't stopped speculation. The moment news broke that she was officially shutting it down for the year, critics and commentators asked the same question. Could she have come back if the Fever needed her in the playoffs? Was this about caution, or was it about optics? But those questions miss the point. The playoffs are about the team. The future is about Caitlin. And the Fever understand that without a healthy Clark, their ceiling is capped, no matter how resilient the rest of the roster proves to be. Athletes across sports history have proven what happens when teams gamble on short-term gain. Derrick Rose's knee. Kevin Durant's Achilles. Countless stars who were pushed back onto the court before they were ready, only to suffer worse injuries that changed the course of their careers. Indiana wasn't going to make that mistake. Not with Caitlin. Not with everything at stake. And to her credit, Clark herself embraced the decision. Her statement was calm, focused, and reassuring. She didn't frame it as a setback or a crisis. She framed it as a necessary step in a much larger journey. That composure has become one of her defining traits. She doesn't feed into drama, doesn't fuel speculation. She accepts the challenge, puts her head down, and does the work. That maturity is why her fans trust that this is a pause, not a derailment. From a medical perspective, the cautious approach is also about confidence. An athlete recovering from a groin injury has to trust their body again. It's not just about the tissue healing, it's about the mind believing that every sprint, every cut, every pivot is safe. That mental barrier can be the difference between playing free and playing tentative. By giving Caitlin the rest of 2025 off, the Fever are ensuring she has the time to not just heal physically, but to rebuild that trust in herself without the spotlight forcing her to prove something too soon. There's also the reality of her workload. Clark didn't just play a rookie season in the WNBA. She came straight off one of the most grueling college campaigns in recent history. From carrying Iowa to back-to-back Final Fours, to being the most talked-about athlete in the country, to jumping directly into professional competition without much rest, her body was already under enormous strain. In some ways, this injury may be the forced reset she needed. A reminder that even the brightest stars can't burn non-stop without consequences. Fans may not like it, but they'll appreciate it in the long run. Because when Caitlin Clark steps back on the court in 2026, she'll be healthy, rested, and ready to dominate again. And she won't just be returning as the face of the Fever. She'll be returning as a symbol of what it looks like when women athletes are valued enough to be protected, not exploited. That's why the phrase, "health first," isn't just a slogan here. It's the whole story. It's the reason the Fever made the decision, the reason Clark accepted it, and the reason this injury might end up being less of a setback and more of a setup. A setup for a stronger team, a stronger Caitlin, and a stronger foundation for the future. Yes, fans will miss the highlight reels. Yes, the league will feel her absence in primetime slots. But none of that matters if she isn't healthy enough to build the career everyone knows she's capable of. Protecting her now means guaranteeing that her impact will stretch far beyond a single season. And when she does return, the story won't be about a lost year. It'll be about the comeback, the resilience, and the next chapter in a career that's only just getting started. When Caitlin Clark went down for the rest of the 2025 season, the immediate assumption across the basketball world was simple. The Indiana Fever were finished. How could a young, rebuilding team survive without the player who was not only their top scorer and playmaker but also their cultural lightning rod? For many, the expectation was collapse. Instead, what followed was something far more surprising: resilience. The narrative quickly shifted from, "Can Indiana survive?" to, "Who will step up?" And the answer came from all corners of the roster. The Fever didn't fold. They didn't sulk. They adjusted. And in that adjustment, the team found a new gear, proving that while Caitlin Clark may be the face of the franchise, the future of Indiana basketball isn't dependent on one player alone. The first change was leadership. Without Caitlin on the floor, veterans had to become louder, more intentional, more visible. Players who had previously deferred to Clark in clutch situations suddenly had no choice but to take responsibility. Whether it was organizing the offense, locking down defensively, or keeping morale steady, the veterans became the heartbeat. That shift didn't just steady the team, it laid a foundation for leadership that will remain when Caitlin returns. Then came the young guns. Bench players who rarely saw significant minutes earlier in the season suddenly had the green light. Their roles expanded, their confidence grew, and their development accelerated. For some, it was the first chance to show what they could really do on a professional stage. That growth can't be overstated. When you give young players responsibility, you don't just get short-term production, you get long-term belief. And the results spoke for themselves. Indiana started grinding out wins, finding ways to compete even against stronger rosters. The Fever secured a playoff berth, something that would have seemed unlikely the moment Clark's season was ruled over. These weren't flukes. They were the product of a team refusing to let one injury define them. The most fascinating part of this evolution has been the team's offense. Without Clark's deep shooting and playmaking, Indiana had to find other ways to generate points. That meant leaning more on inside scoring, moving the ball more deliberately, and embracing a balanced attack. Instead of one player dictating pace and space, the Fever became a unit where multiple players contributed. It wasn't always flashy, but it worked. Defensively, too, the team sharpened. Knowing they couldn't rely on Clark's offensive fireworks to bail them out, the Fever dug in on the other end of the floor. Games became about grit, about holding opponents to lower scores, about forcing turnovers and capitalizing on effort plays. In a league where defense often gets overshadowed by highlight reels, Indiana showed that toughness could keep them alive in the playoff hunt. The psychological growth may be the biggest win. Every time the Fever take the floor without Clark, they're learning who they are as a team. They're proving to themselves that they don't need to wait for their star to rescue them. They can adapt, compete, and sometimes even thrive. That knowledge will only make them more dangerous when Clark returns, because then Indiana will be both star-powered and battle-tested. For the fans, this has been a bittersweet revelation. Of course, they miss Caitlin. Her absence leaves an undeniable void in energy, in excitement, in sheer star power. But watching the rest of the team rise to the occasion has been rewarding in its own way. It's proof that the Fever aren't a one-woman show, even if Caitlin is the headline act. The league itself benefits, too. One of the long-standing critiques of the WNBA has been its reliance on singular stars to drive attention. Caitlin Clark's presence has been invaluable, but the Fever's performance without her shows the importance of building depth and balance. Fans tuning in now see a team that can win through multiple pathways, not just a Caitlin Clark highlight reel. That's healthier for the league's long-term growth. There's also a strategic silver lining. By being forced to adapt now, the Fever are essentially rehearsing for the future. When Clark comes back, she won't need to carry the same load she did before. Her teammates will be more confident, more prepared, and more capable of sharing the spotlight. That takes pressure off her shoulders and makes the Fever harder to defend. Opponents won't be able to simply zero in on Caitlin, because the rest of the roster has proven it can punish defenses that overcommit. None of this erases the disappointment of her absence. The Fever are undeniably better with Caitlin Clark on the floor. But what they've gained in her absence, resilience, depth, confidence, could end up being even more valuable in the long run. It's the kind of adversity that forges identity, the kind of trial that builds the backbone of championship-caliber teams. In sports, it's easy to frame a season-ending injury as a lost year. But for the Indiana Fever, this season has been anything but lost. They've grown, they've adapted, and they've positioned themselves to be stronger when their star returns. That's the hidden story here, one that matters just as much as Caitlin's rehab. The Fever are no longer just Caitlin Clark's team. They're Indiana's team. And when the two forces combine again, Clark's brilliance and Indiana's newfound depth, the rest of the league should be nervous. From the moment Caitlin Clark was drafted by the Indiana Fever, expectations were sky high. Not just from Fever fans, not just from the WNBA community, but from the entire sports world. She wasn't merely a rookie, she was branded as a phenomenon, a game changer, the player who could pull women's basketball into the mainstream spotlight once and for all. Those expectations only grew as her rookie season unfolded. Every highlight went viral. Every game was broadcast like a national event. Clark wasn't just the face of a franchise. She was treated as the savior of an entire league. Fans, analysts, and networks all bought into the idea that she could single-handedly carry the WNBA into its next era. But when her season ended early with a groin injury, those expectations collided with a harsh reality. Suddenly, Fever fans had to adjust from expecting nightly fireworks to simply hoping the team could keep its head above water. And on a broader level, the league had to adapt to the fact that its biggest star was sidelined just as the playoff push heated up. For many fans, this was jarring. They had bought tickets months in advance to see Clark play live, only to realize she wouldn't be back until 2026. Casual viewers who had tuned in just for her were left disappointed. The media scrambled to figure out how to market playoff games without their most bankable star. And across social media, the conversation shifted from, "Look at what Caitlin's doing," to, "How will the Fever survive without her?" This disconnect between expectations and reality isn't new in sports, but Caitlin's case feels amplified. Part of that is because her rise has been so meteoric. Fans weren't given time to manage expectations. Everything she did felt historic, unprecedented, larger than life. When that momentum screeched to a halt, the whiplash was severe. Some critics seized the moment to question whether the hype had gone too far. "See," they said, "this is why you can't build an entire league around one player." Others went further, suggesting the WNBA was in trouble without her on the court. But those takes oversimplify the situation. The Fever's ability to make the playoffs without Clark actually proves the opposite. The league is bigger than one player, even if she is its brightest star. Still, fans had to grapple with the disappointment. For a generation of young girls who had worn Caitlin's jersey to games and watched her highlights on repeat, the news felt personal. They weren't just missing a player, they were missing their hero. The Fever's attendance numbers dipped, and TV ratings softened without Clark's presence. That's the reality of losing a transcendent star. But here's where expectations evolved. Once fans realized Caitlin wasn't coming back, they started shifting their focus. Instead of demanding highlight reels and nightly record-breaking performances, they began celebrating smaller victories. A hard-fought win, a breakout performance from a role player, the team clinching a playoff berth against the odds. The story stopped being about one player and became about the resilience of an entire roster. This reset of expectations may actually be healthy in the long run. For too long, everything about Indiana was framed through the Caitlin Clark lens. Every headline, every conversation, every broadcast began and ended with her name. That level of focus isn't sustainable, for the player or the franchise. Now, with her sidelined, fans are seeing the Fever as a team, not just a vehicle for one superstar. That shift could make Caitlin's eventual return even more impactful, because she'll be stepping into a team identity that's been forged through adversity. The narrative surrounding her absence also says a lot about how women's sports are covered. In men's sports, when a superstar goes down, the storyline often turns to the next man up mentality, celebrating depth and resilience. With Clark, the coverage leaned heavily into disappointment, as if her absence alone could derail the entire league. That framing overlooks the progress the WNBA has made and the fact that plenty of stars are still delivering at a high level. Fans themselves are pushing back on that narrative. Many argue that while Clark is the biggest draw, her absence has created opportunities to spotlight other players. Teammates stepping up, veterans proving their worth, and rising stars across the league showing they belong in the conversation. In other words, expectations have shifted from Caitlin carries everything to Caitlin is part of a much larger ecosystem. That doesn't mean the hype is gone. Far from it. If anything, the anticipation for her 2026 return is already building. Fans are already talking about her comeback, speculating how much stronger she'll be, and envisioning the Fever as contenders once she rejoins a roster that has grown in her absence. The expectations will return, they always do, but they'll be tempered by the reality check of 2025. For Caitlin herself, this shift in expectations might be the biggest blessing. She no longer has to shoulder the impossible weight of carrying a franchise and a league every single night. The Fever's growth in her absence means she can come back into a more balanced situation. Fans will still expect greatness, that's the price of being Caitlin Clark, but the narrative won't be quite as suffocating. And for Fever fans, the reality is this. The season didn't implode without her. Yes, it hurt. Yes, the spark was different. But the team proved it could compete. And in sports, that's what really matters. The initial expectations may not have been met, but the reality turned out to be something just as valuable. Proof that the Fever are deeper, tougher, and more resilient than anyone thought. Injuries always force a recalibration of expectations. What makes this story unique is how much it exposed about the way fans, media, and the league itself view Caitlin Clark. She's not just another rookie. She's not just another star. She's the standard by which everything is measured, even in her absence. And that's why the narrative will continue to evolve long after the final whistle of this season. Because if there's one thing fans, critics, and the Fever themselves have learned in 2025, it's this: expectations will always be sky high when Caitlin Clark is involved. The challenge, and the opportunity, is learning how to thrive when reality doesn't match them. The Indiana Fever's 2025 season will always carry an asterisk. It was the year Caitlin Clark went down. But instead of collapsing, the team found its footing, clawed into the playoffs, and showed the league that they're more than one superstar. That resilience may turn out to be the most important development of all. For fans, the disappointment is real. Everyone wanted to see Clark lighting up defenses in the postseason, dropping logo threes, and pulling in record-breaking viewership. That dream will have to wait. But in its place, something else emerged. Proof that the Fever can fight, adapt, and grow without her. That shift in identity sets the stage for an even bigger comeback in 2026. For Caitlin, the choice to sit out the rest of the season wasn't about defeat, it was about discipline. Health comes first. A groin strain isn't the type of injury you gamble with, not when your career has the potential to reshape an entire sport. By resting now, she's protecting her future, and the payoff will come the moment she steps back on the court fully healthy, rested, and more dangerous than ever. The hype hasn't vanished, it's only been delayed. And if anything, anticipation for her return is already building. Fans aren't just waiting for Caitlin Clark to play again, they're waiting to see the Fever, a deeper and stronger team, pair with their star to create something bigger than hype. Something sustainable. Something unstoppable. So no, this isn't the end of the Caitlin Clark effect. It's the intermission. And when the curtain rises in 2026, the show will be even bigger. If you're here for the comeback, the growth, and the new era of women's basketball, hit that subscribe button, smash the like, and tell us in the comments. Will Caitlin Clark's return change everything all over again?